What's going on, guys? Geo Level Up Design here. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you guys are having a great day so far. So now we're going to go into a nice big bulk part of the next phase, right? So phase 3, let's say. We already have our GDD in line. We have the framework, we have our mechanics, we have our setting, the theme of the game. We have an idea of kind of what the pillars are, the main things that we're going to tie into whenever we're introducing something to the game. And now we're going to go into, again, really big chunk is going into 3 parts. One part is bigger than the other, but the 3 parts we're going to go into first is actually developing a story, right? What's the premise of it? What's happening? What are the players going to experience in it? Then we're going to go into objectives, and that kind of branches down to different parts of it too, but main objectives in the game, right? What's the player's goal as they're playing through it? And then lastly, we're going to be looking on getting a main dominant, right? A focal point, a point of interest, whatever you want to use a term for there. But we're going to go ahead and start into kind of the elements of the story. So let's go ahead and check that out right now. All right, cool. So now we're going to go into obviously most games have a story element, right? Something that the players are discovering, knows about, or is trying to, figure out the situation, right, on what's happening during their gameplay. If you're playing more like, let's say, if a multiplayer map, you're never really gonna have much of a story there. There's probably small story elements, like in some areas, just kind of add a depth to it. But realistically, campaign modes, obviously in shooters, that's different, right? There's a story that you're playing through. You have, single player games. Most single player games are gonna have that. You're gonna have maybe more like horror games, thriller games. Pretty much anything is gonna have a premise of a story. What happens? You have to find out what happened to your dad. You have to go and explore this area to find a castle, right? A hidden castle, let's say. So in this step, once we have everything else kind of set up, right, we're going to start focusing on getting a baseline set up, right? So you really get an idea of how, in the scope of the game, is it going to progress, right? Normally when you guys are discussing, the game and getting all the assets and mechanics and whatnot set up, trying to get a scope of what's going to be. What's the gameplay like? Is it going to be 15 minutes? Is it going to be a really short game? Is it going to be 2 hours? Is it going to be 60 plus hours, right? We got to figure out what is going to happen throughout that step. Now, not necessarily you don't have to have it laid out how, at what point, right? So act 1 and this one step, they're going to find out who their father is, right? Not anything like that specific, but we do want to get an idea of what the actual overarching story is. Who are the main characters, who's a protagonist, antagonist, who are side characters, if you do have plan on having side quests, who's that, who does that go to, what's the story dialogue for that, just things along those lines. Now, along with doing that story, you want to make sure that you have a GDD. You should have a GDD already, better. But if you do have your GDD set up, is now tracking all of that in there. It's going to be kind of a work in progress because, you're going to have some people who, if you guys are working on a small team, right, you're going to have some people who like a different type of gameplay than others, or different perspectives. And you might need to, not really necessarily clash heads, but trying to get on the same baseline of what type of game you guys are trying to go for. Some people not even care at all. For example, programmers don't give a damn about the story for the most part. They're there to, you tell them, hey, what do you need mechanically wise? What features do you need? All right, cool, I'll work on that. They don't care about anything else. But, when you have more level designers, when you have some artists, directors as well, or even the original, if you're in the team with investors and whatever, the people who pitch the game, the idea, they're going to want to know what that is. A level designer is going to want to know how the story, or where the story is, so they can lay out the interactions, the clues, journal entries, whatever in the scene to fall in line with the story. And artists, when designing and building out the world itself, making it pretty and whatnot, they're going to want to go ahead and add in their elements too, to tie into that as well. Now, with that being said, there is a, you don't need to get the full story set up, but it's good to have, again, really good, solid, let's say 90% is what I like to aim for, just at least get an idea of what we're working with, right? But now, with that being said, there is a sort of structure, or ideal structure for, some of the most compelling stories in the movie industry, game industry, and that's called the hero's journey. I'm actually gonna go ahead and show you guys kind of a little snippet of what that overall looks like. So let's look at that right now. All right, so really just gonna go over this briefly. Don't want to go into in depth because this could be a whole video on its own. And I'll go ahead and put a link in the description as well to check out, kind of a little more in depth, like overview of what the hero's journey is. But basically, like huge, masterpieces like Lord of the Rings, all three of them really, the Harry Potter series, they all kind of follow this sort of flow, right? It's obviously spread across multiple movies, but nonetheless, it kind of follows that, right? So it is, some people might say it's a 12-step, some people might say it's a 17-step guideline to present the story. But basically, the gist of it is, right, and this, I feel like this is a more simpler way of saying it. This is why I chose this one. Basically, you have player, ordinary world, nothing crazy, just living their life. They get a call of adventure, right? From the call of adventure, they're gonna go ahead and go do something, find someone, be someone, whatever. They might be hesitant first. They don't want to do it. They're not interested. And then for whatever reason, something's going to inspire them, which is maybe meeting somebody or somebody dies, unfortunately, or something crazy that it makes them go and embark on a journey. And then that's basically crossing your first threshold. And then, so on and so forth. I'm not going to go over all of them, but you go over, the tests, being, the player being forced to do certain things, allies, the conflict, like what's going on, what's the issue, who's the bad guy, in a sense, or bad guys. You're rewarded for stuff like that. Then, they get blockaded, somebody dies, they get resurrected, or they get reborn is another way that they do it. And then basically it's like the climax, right? It's done. Like the story's over, wahoo, and then they go back to their ordinary life. Right, so again, I'll put a link in the description so you guys review this a little more thoroughly, but the gist of it is that most stories have this sort of concept. Again, some things are added for the story to really tie it in together, right, or to expand upon it, but realistically, they all have that same baseline. Regular Joe Schmo, somebody needs his help, he's gonna go on an adventure, people die along the way, they meet friends, they get stronger, they get weaker, something horrible happens to them, they get stronger, they meet the bad guy, they fight the bad guy, they kill him, world is saved, hurrah, right? Woo! Now they go on into their normal life again. Again, that is a big part of creating the story, so something to keep in mind whenever you're generating that. But now, obviously, with having that story element set up, right, we're gonna go into like the actual core content of the game that you're making, right? So let's go ahead and look into like the objectives part of it and how that looks. All right, sweet. So now, like I said, it is a big part. You have your story, you have your mechanics, you are ready to get started, right? Almost super close. Obviously, if you guys are a bigger team, then there are people already kind of getting things stuff in engine and prototyping and whatnot. But realistically, if it's just you're a one-man show or you have a very small team doing it, when you have your baseline set up, it's like making a house, right? You have your foundation set up, you have your blueprints, you have your map of how everything, like the actual house, is going to look. When that foundation's set up and you have everything done, it's so much easier for you to put up the walls, put in the electrical components of it, put in the plumbing, furniture, walls, roof, everything, right? So first thing you got to kind of keep in mind is putting out the quests, right? What are the goals for the game? And that could be anything. Obviously, you could have the main goal of fight Cthulhu, right? Cool, that's great. But it's not only going to be that. They're not going to just spawn into a world and, hey, you got to go fight him, right? Usually things happen before that to either build up the suspense to get to the climax, or to build more depth to the story. And that's, again, what you do is you have typically quests to go and complete. You have goals, objectives, whatever you like to put on there. But some examples, like go and find X, collect 3 of these, collect 6 of those, turn in those 3 or 6 of those. Sometimes it might just be survive until help arrives, something as simple as that, right? And after that, we're going to go ahead and actually look into the obstacles, right? And I use obstacles as a broad term because obstacles could be actual environment obstacles, right? That you try and go in through a building, but the building's door collapsed, so you have to go around to actually do that. And then that adds in a story element because it might be something big, might be a combat sequence, new enemy introducing, whatever. That could also refer to enemies, though. Like a good example is Resident Evil, that really big guy. I forgot his name, but he's gonna be right here. terrifying, doesn't die, but he's an obstacle because he spawns into the world, right? And he chases you, and you could delay him, you could stun him, you could hide in a safe room if you like, but still, nonetheless, he's like basically omnipresent the whole time. So that's something that's going to prevent you moving forward, because you might be trying to go into the next world or next area of the map. You open the door and boom, there he is, and you got to find a way to escape, go around, and whatever. And that's a good thing to now think about, like, how do the enemies that are being introduced, the setbacks work? What are they doing? Can they die? How do you kill them? How do you avoid them? Do you have to hide? Is there, can you throw something to distract? Whatever. And a big part of this too is, obstacles can be a lot of things, right? It could be story elements, it could be just a simple lock and key door, it could be puzzles, right? You're gonna go into an area, but you have to figure out the passcode to do it, and to discover that passcode, you have to go on a little mini adventure, let's say, to figure out the first key code, and then maybe you get a note card that gives you the third key code, and then so on and so forth, right? Now, once we have that done, right, it's to paint out an idea of the types of assets that we would have. Assets, set pieces, whatever you like, but main components of it, right? There's going to be the first thing, kind of starting off in a broad needs, and then going down is like if you have locked doors, right? Locked doors, you're going to need keys. So with keys, you're going to need the mesh for it, you're going to need the code for it, whatever. Again, you get designers, they'll handle that for you. But it's figuring out what exactly is needed to go from point A to point B of this gameplay to finish it. And you start getting those in line and getting that set up, right? And again, these could be a lot of things. It doesn't have to be just just an enemy, right? It's going to be a broad set of things. It's environment, not objectives, obstacles, things that happen even as you're exploring, right? Maybe the world is collapsing, columns falls, hits this building, you were supposed to go over there, crap, now what do we do? Maybe we have to go to the science building, right? And then from there, it's another kind of arc of the story. Now, a big part of the next one is going to be into the dominance. We kind of talked about this before, and I'll link a video right here for the kind of how that looks and what to aim for. But let's go ahead and check that out real quick. All right, last one, perfect. So again, this is towards a focal point or dominant focus of the level, right? If you're having just one level, it's pretty straightforward to do. You guys probably already know exactly what you're gonna do even before that. If you have a very large, like semi-open or open world map, there's gonna be a couple of them, so you got to break that down into chunks, right? Now, again, I do emphasize this. The dominant isn't always a thing. Like in some maps, you're not really gonna have, or some levels, let me say that instead, you're not gonna have something that's like the main focus of it. But realistically, you do, even in the simplest of terms, right? If you have a shooter map, right? We're gonna talk about this battle royale map because it's huge. You look into each of the sections of that map. You have the airport, you have refinery, you have the certain towns, you have whatever it may be. There's a big element in there that sticks out, right? So you have an oil refinery, you're gonna have giant oil rigs, right? Even inside something like that, an oil refinery, you could even have just a giant crash like jet plane that's now like a main part of that map. If we're talking about like in an observatory, you have a big tower to observe, right? Something like that. So even though you may not think you have it, there's gonna be something that's gonna wanna, even in the background element, that again catch the player's eye, and then obviously ties into the story elements of that level. And again, it is a main point of interest within that level or the world, but realistically, if you have a big map, you're going to have certain sections of the level, and that kind of applies to that too, right? You're going to want to have a giant windmill on a farm, and if they see that, they're probably going to want to go explore it. So that's one thing to keep in mind too. If it's going to be a big asset, you might want to make sure that it's explorable, because if they get there and they can't even get into the building, that kind of sucks, right? They waste your time walking there, and then they're like, well, that was pointless, now I'm not going to do this again. The next time you actually introduce one, right, that's a big dominant, and it may be explorable, they're not going to want to go there, because why would they? They didn't work the last time, why would it work this time, right? So you got to keep stuff like that consistent. Now, again, to mention and to emphasize it, it's something that's going to help them understand what their goal is and catches their eye. And it doesn't have to be like, sometimes like, usually dominants are very big things, right? Or things that really stand out in the scene. But sometimes you could be as simple as you just open a room into a lab, right? And you have like a little floating whatever capsule. It's glowing, and it's it's really sticking out. And that's something you need to collect. That's your dominant of the scene, right? That's like your featured asset is probably a better term for it. But that's one example for it. And then again, using the composition, perspectives, and cutscenes as well. It doesn't go that cutscenes are definitely welcome in scenarios like that to emphasize on something and also add depth to the story in that moment. And I'll go ahead again link my video here going over dominance and like perspectives and whatnot, so you can check those out. And then yeah, that's kind of like the phase 3 of this, right? You have everything else built up, and now going into this one, it's more like doing the fine tuning and laying out the level. The next one is actually gonna be the last video. Ooh, sounds great. But and that's really actually like building everything out, right? Obviously I'll go into that more in depth once I have that all set up and ready to go. But nonetheless, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Hope this was informative for you guys. If you have any questions, leave a comment in the video. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, like the video. I try and do a video or two every week. Usually Tuesdays and Thursdays are like my lenient days, so I try and get some stuff done there, but obviously that hasn't been consistent. But again, appreciate all the support. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take it easy.